A lot of people miss the fact that people want to help. And when they help, they feel successful because they're a part of
Right.
this.
Obviously, as the company scales, you build this go-to-market machine with, a marketing team, and lead generation, and it
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
at the early stages, like none of that is needed. Just go
Right.
leverage a network of your friends, your investors, your advisors, other people on the team to get in front of people, get them excited about this. I think people are going to be surprised by how much people love being part of those innovations and helping startup companies. People love doing that, and if they can be part of the kind of the success journey of the company, they're very happy to do that.
Ayal, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. So let's start from the top. Tell me about Anjuna.
Sure. So at Anjuna, we're a cybersecurity company. What we do is we provide a universal confidential computing platform. And at a very, very high level, what we enable is collaboration. And I guess what I mean by that, maybe in 30 seconds, is um, the best security solutions have always been enablers, business enablers, right? I think one of the best examples is the firewall, where, the reason why the firewall is so successful is that it enabled organizations to connect to the internet for the first time, and that just unlocked a huge amount of business value. And what confidential computing does, what we do is enable collaboration. And because every application essentially has three components, right? It has the code, it has the data, and it has the infrastructure it's running on. And if you have more than one entity, let's say you want to run in the cloud into somebody else's infrastructure, or you want to take their data into somebody else's AI model, which is, using collaborating on code and data, you run into a security and privacy issue. And what confidential computing does, it allows you to run it all in a way that nobody gets access to each other's code or data. So it just enables you to run, in any environment, run on in anybody's code, collaborate, multiple data sources without anybody seeing each other's data.
That's really interesting. What's your like core customer?
We tend to work with essentially anybody with any use for any type of sensitive data. So anybody with any regulated data or just any PII, credit card data, anybody that handles sensitive data. But then we're starting, and then wanting to run it, either in the cloud or in many cases now we're seeing in AI. Anybody want to leverage AI models but have sensitive data, it usually becomes security and privacy. In many cases become a blocker. So again, it tends to be obviously financial services, right? Top banks, payment companies and credit card companies, healthcare companies, we see manufacturing, government customers, these types of organizations. But we're now starting to see retailers around, how do you protect, PCI data, credit card information, in the store, for example. So to some extent, any organization with any type of sensitive data.
Right. And you just named all the ones that are very difficult, heavy compliance. Is that right?
It's true, and to some extent, it's funny because I think cybersecurity in general works a little bit different than other industries in the sense that the early adopters tend to be these kind of very difficult customers, and it's for two reasons. It's one, because they're regulated, so they kind of have to protect the data, so they have to look into kind of what's new and how to kind of do this, but also their targets, right? If you're a large bank, banks are that's where the money is, right? You're going to be attacked,
Right.
and you hear these statistics of the major credit card companies or the major banks or like they get attacked. I heard statistics, tell us like billions of times a year in terms of how many attacks they have to combat. So they just have to think about security. And that's why even though they're not early adopters in other areas, when it comes to security, they're willing to kind of try, new things and bring them into the environment because they have to.
That makes a lot of sense. And what brought you to this? Like, this is a difficult industry. You've had a lot of success early on. You've brought this to market, but like, you could have chose a lot easier product or clients or why this for you?
Yeah. So one is I love this industry. I love cybersecurity. I love kind of what it enables, and I think it's kind of the basic building blocks to do a lot of things. And not just in not just in just in the real world as well, right? If we couldn't trust the banks with our money, we wouldn't have banks, right? And we wouldn't have kind of things like I think security is always, and trust to some extent is the fundamental building block to everything that we do, right? So I,
Yeah.
I just love the importance of it. But what kind of got me into this was my background was I actually started in Unit 8200, which is the Israeli equivalent of the NSA, and that's where I ran into cybersecurity and kind of got super excited by what it means. And there's a very, there's technical depth to it that I loved, but also just the, how interesting it is and kind of what you can do, with it. And then the rest of my career was basically in the cybersecurity space. It's all I've ever done. I'm mostly in the private sector. I'm mostly doing product management for enterprise security companies. And I worked at, got acquired by, IBM, got acquired by Cisco when I was at OpenDNS, went public with Imperva, but it was always, these cybersecurity companies that were
Right.
usually, I love the startup phase, you start small and then you become big either by growing organically or by getting acquired by a large company.
When did you move to the US?
So actually, this is my second time living in the US. I actually lived here as a kid for a couple of years.
Okay.
Um, and it's funny, it's like maybe 2 minutes from kind of where I live now. I lived as a kid.
No way.
It's crazy. Um, and that's just because it's Silicon Valley, right? It's kind of the mecca of, my dad was in tech, so we kind of relocated here for a couple of years. And then I moved again about 12 and a half years ago. And this was, I got my MBA in Berkeley in the Haas Business School, and then just stayed after that.
Well, that's a great education, and you can't go too much better than Haas when it comes to this. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to ask a question that I'm going to hopefully not bring us to down a windy road. But so you were in Israeli military when you got into this. Did you learn Krav Maga? Isn't that part of the
So I'm not an expert, but yeah, as part of your kind of basic training, you have to learn Krav Maga. So I know the very basics. But as you can imagine, essentially being a kind of essentially a software developer, this wasn't kind of the core skill I had to leverage.
like how long and like how much training did you do around that type of stuff?
Oh, not much, just a few
Not
basic
much.
lessons. Yeah,
Okay.
this is part of the basic training course you have to kind of go through. Again, I was also an officer, so when you're an officer training, you go through all these weapon training and all that. But again, it's not something that you kind of use on a day to day
Right.
basis when you're writing software essentially.
Well, as someone that has been doing jujitsu for, 14, 15 years, I couldn't let that up. I always thought it was a really interesting, probably most practical style of self-defense that there is. I mean, I do jujitsu, but I'm like more of a competition training jujitsu. So it's like if I was in a fight, I'd say, hey, yeah, come over to my academy and I'm going to lay down on the soft mat. And then, it's not as practical. I mean, there's a lot of practicality in it actually, but like Krav Maga, I always thought was such an interesting style because it's so practical. And I mean, we're talking security. So I thought it would be okay to talk about it.
No, definitely, and yeah, that was the way it was developed, right? To be practical, right? It's not for
Right.
that's exactly what it was
Attack
about.
and run away. It's kinda the name of this style. Well, your background, like, you have a very, like, product management, product leadership background, which I think is really interesting as well, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is how long did it take until you actually hired a product person in the early stages? I'm assuming, like, you were very, really a part of building the product, and at what stage did you realize I'm building a company and I might need someone else to be thinking about building a product?
Yeah, so to some extent, again, as you said, I grew up in product. This was kind of my most of my career, and I kind of started product, and I grew up to my last role. Before this, I was a VP of product at another company, and I was kind of leading products at other companies. What I kind of saw over and over again is again, not necessarily in the last company I was at, but you can constantly do it. You talk to other VPs of product, you talk to other people, and then kind of what sometimes happens is that the CEO of the company kind of says, "Oh, the product is kind of what I'm building." So they would sort of come in and basically try to make product decisions. The problem with that is, as essentially what the CEO is building is not, or the founders are building is not the product. They're building the company, and the product is part of that, but it's not the only, or even the certainly the 90% of it, right? It's just a piece of it. Uh, and as the company grows and scales, the CEOs gets, as a CEO, I'm getting, further and further away from kind of the product. And yeah, I talk to customers, and I talk to partners, and I talk to the industry, but I don't have this sort of day-to-day visibility into kind of what needs to happen to the product. And what I think is very dangerous is, CEOs that come in and try to kind of manage the product for the product management team. And that's why I kind of knew pretty early on that the minute it made sense for kind of where the company was, started, engaging with customers, started, definitely, as we're starting to sell the product, I need to hire somebody else to go run the product and not kind of do it myself. And then also stay out of their way, meaning not try to kind of manage the product through them and kind of tell them what to do, because at that point, like, why do you even bring that person? And yeah, for me, it was the product side. I think it's true. I was like, we're a YC company, and as part of YC company, you have these amazing YC founders coming in to talk to you. But every conversation with Drew Houston from Dropbox, it said that he kind of, again, he's a developer, right? So he felt like, I need to write code, and he kind of wrote code as the CEO of the company pretty far into the journey. And he said at some point when he realized nobody kind of, wanted to tell him that, they kind of had to code around what he did, because again, it was far away from this. He was running the company. He wasn't, so they kind of had to, but nobody kind of wanted to tell him. So they had to kind of code the way and kind of, around what he did to make sure that he didn't break anything. And I think that's kind of, where you, kind of as CEOs, regardless of kind of what you did before, you have the tendency to come, so I know how to do this very well. Let me do this. But no, as the CEO, you have a different job, right? It's not that functional job, and you need to be very careful that you bring other people and not kind of do their job for it.
Yeah, you really need to empower those functional leaders to do their job, and, I think it's probably hard sometimes. I always feel like every CEO that I ever worked with has, like, a tilt to something. It's like maybe a lot of them, you know, over the last 20 years has been, like, engineers that have built companies, right? And so they
Right.
kinda have that engineering element to them. More and more, I see product management, product leaders building companies, which makes a lot of sense to me. You see less sales or less marketing, actually, more ops, but engineering and product is definitely it's I work with primarily product technology companies, but
Yep.
trying to understand like where do they, relinquish that until how much and at what percent at what stage, I think can be really hard for some teams.
100%. Sometimes as the CEO, you kind of start with almost everything, but then somebody told me, which I thought was a great. You need to kind of understand when you need to kind of fire yourself from that role and bring somebody kind of better than you to go manage it.
Right.
For some roles, it's very easy, but I've never done marketing before, so very easy for me to, okay, I kind of do the basic marketing, but very quickly I kind of ran into kind of the depth of what I knew, or sales, or a bunch of other, or engineering management is something that I never done the skill. So very easy, but if that's the functional area that you came from, you feel like you can do it for much longer. That probably makes sense. So you need to be careful and kind of being very upfront with yourself, or very okay, this is now the time for me to kind of fire myself in that role and bring somebody that can go run this, better than I can.
What do you see often from that product vision of well, let me say this. What I see often, I work with a bunch of product technology companies. And when I look at like maturity of the organization within each of the functional areas and kind of look at the history of this, sales is really mature because there's systems and processes that they understand. They can choose a sales methodology. Um, I find that engineering, agile, other methodologies that they're using to tighten that up is very clear. Um, and sales and engineering are usually the largest parts of the organization within product companies. And then I find it always so interesting that there's so few product people within most often within these companies. And oftentimes, the product person isn't the right level of product person that they need. Sometimes I see someone that's truly a product analyst and they're the head of product, or they're a product manager, but they've never really been a product leader, meaning that they're good at taking and creating requirements and liaison to the engineering, but they don't really understand how to pull the intake from the market, sales, customers, and maybe don't even know how to prioritize that properly. And oftentimes you see other people on the leadership team jumping in, primarily the CEO or marketing or sales, really trying to drive maybe the wrong priorities or even the wrong inputs. So my question to you is this something that you've seen and why is it like this?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack about you said, and I agree with a lot of things that you said. I guess one thing to start with is product management is the kind of the product management aspect of things, regardless of kind of who does it, is something that's going to happen, right? If the product, organization is not taking it, somebody else is going to, like, decisions need to be made around prioritization. What are we building? What are we, training this, like, it is going to happen. Somebody's going to be making those decisions. And if the product organization is not, doesn't have the right level of people, or is not structured correctly, or doesn't have the right, let's say, relationship within the organization, then it's not going to be the product organization doing this, or they're not going to be making the right decisions, which means, the wrong products are going to get built, or there's going to be a huge disconnect between the field, the go-to-market side of the house, and the, engineering and product side of the house. So one thing is, somebody's going to take this, but again, might not make the right decision. This kind of goes back to what is the role of product within the organization. Um, and essentially, for me, the role of product is, at a very, very high level, connect the, kind of the outside facing, so, the customers, the market, and the, the go-to-market team, the sales, the marketing, customer success, basically take all of that and connect it to the, to the engineering, to kind of the product side of the house. And basically say, okay, this is where the market is going, and this is kind of the right solutions that we need to build. This is the problems that our customers are having, and this is kind of the best way to solve them, which again might not be the way the customers think these are the best ways, but this is the kind of the right way to solve this. And then basically prioritizing that to the engineering team, and making sure that happens. So that is, to me, is the core kind of value of product. And again, if you have a product manager who's not, is kind of too low level, then you might have somebody, just writing these, working just with the engineering team, and kind of writing these, very tactical, but they're not going to necessarily make the right prioritization decisions.
Right.
And that's where you kind of engineers kind of tend to kind of lose trust in product in those cases, because engineers are extremely smart people, right? They're not, product managers are not smarter than engineers, right? So if there's no outside input, which is what the product manager brings to this, to that side of the business, then the engineers can make decisions on their own, right? And you kind of need the other side of it. The product manager also need to have very good relationships with the salespeople and with the customer success organization, and they need to trust them, because the product managers need to be brought into those conversations with the customers and with the market, to be able to get those insights. So they kind of sit in the middle, and have to build the right relationship with both sides.
Yeah, I think that's so right. You have to really have a balanced approach, and that with your clients and prospective clients, the market. And often I see you bring salespeople, and really good salespeople are really good salespeople, and sometimes they're selling internally in the organization what their deals need versus what the market needs, right? And so oftentimes I'll see them come in, and they really believe it because the people that they're talking to are telling them, "Hey, we need this, and actually, we'll pay you for this. Please build this." But sometimes sales doesn't see the full market, and it can cause
Yes.
some challenges.
Yes, sales is incentivized, right? I look at my sales team; they're incentivized to be very short-term focused, right? Make this quarter, get these next deal in front of you. They don't have and they're not incentivized. They don't need to think about, the next year, the next 2 year, the next, 5 years. That's where, to some extent, product managers come into that, to kind of think about that. But definitely the leadership, the executive team of the company, and the CEO needs to think about, okay, what's best for us as a company. And again, doing sort of a one-off that's going to be great for one customer, and even, maybe even close a huge deal. If that is a one-off for that customer, it's great for the salesperson to meet their number for the quarter, but it's horrible for the company, because you spend a lot of resources building it, and now you have to spend additional resources maintaining it, and you can't sell it to anybody else. The other thing that's sort of interesting here that you mentioned, that is, I think, just listening to the customer. A lot of times customers tell you what they want versus, what problem they're trying to solve. I think the best product managers know how to ask the questions, not what you want us to build, but why. Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And maybe there's a much better way to solve it than what you're thinking about. And
Right.
again, product managers know the technology, know what's kind of the realm of what's possible. And again, there's this very famous, Henry Ford quote that I'm sure you've heard a million times, which is, "If I asked my customers what they want, they would have said, a faster horse." Right? And it's kind of the same thing, right? Customers might say, "This is what I want," but if you go into why do you need, you want to get fast to one place to another, a car might be a much better option than, a faster horse, and a more,
Yeah.
you know, possible, answer than a faster horse.
That's 100% right. And I think, product just needs time to do that type of work. And sometimes they're really pulled into other work, or I've seen product get pulled into some client management responsibilities because of like the work that's happening. But they really need to be pulled out. I think, at a high level view, I think there's not enough product people for the number of product companies that are actually out there. So I think that's part of the issue. And I think the other piece is, I mean, if you look back at technology product companies and how fast they've grown, there's this some lack of maturity within that and understanding from a leadership team how valuable that talent is because it's everything. I think product tends to lead everything. And if you don't spend enough time to really define your ICP, know who you're talking to, who your customers, the personas, what you're trying to solve, and like you said, why we're trying to solve this for them, I find a lot of teams waste a lot of capital and time and energy of their organization.
That's 100% true. And I agree with everything you said. And on top of this, just add to the fact that, again, as I said, many, CEOs and many founders basically think that what they're building is the product. So they should be the product managers. Like, again, early in my career, I was interviewing for this startup company to join as their VP of product. And, I was talking to the CEO and he said, "Oh, if you're going to be managing the product, though, what will I be doing?" I said, "Okay, this is probably not the good," because again, if the CEO is viewing themselves as the VP of product, then one is, yeah, they definitely don't need a VP of product on top of it, but to
Right.
some extent, it's just I don't think it's the right view of what they're actually building. They are building the company. There's a lot of work, that needs to be put into building the company in the right way. Me
Right.
just focusing on the product, there's going to be a lot of aspects that you're going to be missing.
Yeah. I like to define the role of the CEO as corporate and capital development, specifically in a venture-backed technology company. Corporate development is really building the organization, hiring the right people, helping the team define the vision and the plan, and then making sure that you put the right people in the right roles and bringing in the right people. A lot of, Brad Feld once told me, an investor, he said, the role of the CEO is to gather things, gather people, gather capital, gather clients, and I think that's really corporate and capital development is and then empowering that team to work together and give them the tools to work together really well,
Exactly.
and keep on allowing that to collaborate. And I mean, the second part is capital development. I think you have to, as a CEO of a venture backed company specifically, you have to have the ability and time to go out and raise the capital to see that vision through. And you can't have time working on the product. Like, you have to bring someone in that can spend the time, do the right things on the product, or if it's sales or if it's, engineering, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to
Again, yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said. And again, to add to that, yeah, I agree with you. Sort of gathering, I haven't heard it referred to it that way, but I agree completely. It's gathering the people, the capital, gathering the, obviously customers and partners. The other thing on top of this, just the alignment of everybody, right? You have these kind of multiple teams. The job of the CEO is to make sure everybody's kind of going in the same direction. You don't have
yeah.
different, departments going in different directions. So completely agree with everything you said.
Well, I don't wanna go on a tangent on that because I wrote the book on the alignment and focus and accountability, but I
Yeah,
totally believe that. I think it's the symbiotic nature that the CEO has to find the right tools and system to allow that to happen,
yeah,
because I think together, all those people, if you can get them talking in the right way, in the right cadence, and get them aligned, you can get so much more done, and it can be really powerful.
yeah.
Now, I have a question
Yeah,
about YC.
exactly.
You went through the YC program. What was the biggest aha moment that you had in YC?
It's fine. There's just a bunch of these learnings that you kind of get from what you see that you sort of come out, and it's probably the best startup school out there. I would argue it's the best school, startup school out there. And there's just a bunch of kind of learnings in terms of what kind of makes sense to focus on. There's just a bunch of this nuggets of kind of wisdom that I took out. I don't know if the one of
Right.
them was like this huge aha moment. Just I kind of looking back, and it was like a few years ago. And I'll give you just a few examples. One of the things that they said and I loved was it's better to have 10 customers that love you than 100 customers that like you. I thought that was like a very, very profound, like find these kind of first early adopters and make sure they love the product and just love what you do. And you're going to scale from there. It's much better to do that than having these 100 that are like, yeah, they kind of like the product, but and I thought that was a phenomenal piece of information. Another one that actually came from that same Drew Houston talk, he talked about, competition. And he said, at your stage, and again, a lot of YC companies are essentially, seed or, pre-seed or seed or, Series A companies. They're very early on. He said, just don't worry about competition. None of it matters. It's going to matter in the future. He said, Steve Jobs gets on stage and says, we're going to kill your company, like kind of happened to him. That's where you worry about competition.
Right.
Um, but at the early stage, just focus on, product market fit, getting customers, making sure they're happy. Don't worry about what your competitors are doing. It just doesn't matter that much. And I thought that was a very, very good piece of advice on what to focus on. And again, worrying about what even before I went through IT, I would thought about competition early stage is when you look at your competitors and you kind of follow them, you're essentially, you might be an okay number two. You're never going to be a market leader if you look at what your competitors are doing. Look at the market, look at the customers, build what they need, and let other people copy you versus you copying other people. No, but there's another very good piece of advice. They talked about things like, what's the role of, PR? And again, their stance is like, don't bother with PR in the early stages of the company because customers are not going to buy, again, especially if you're a B2B company, companies are not going to buy off of a PR. That's not how they buy. Just don't focus on that. There's kind of value, again, when you're fundraising, there's some value to PR, but it's not about getting, no- the CIO of, Bank of America is not going to look at something, oh, we have to, like, it just doesn't work that way. So it's not the right thing to focus on. There's just a lot of these super interesting nuggets in terms of how to build a company, what to focus on, that I took from that.
Yeah. Those are all great, great learnings. It's hard to, in that, 0 to 1 stage to find those 10 clients that love you when you're still building your product, right? What did that look like for you guys? Like, what was that earliest stage of, like, getting clients and trying to actually have a product that to get them to love that product?
Yeah. So what is again, this to me is like, to some extent is a very kind of product management like experience. Is just, so let's talk about how we get to these customers. Why you have these customers, just listening to them, understanding what their problem is, kind of putting things in front of them, getting their feedback, making them part of making them part of the process. It kind of goes back to agile. It's like you talked about agile. I think
Mhm.
product management is a huge piece of agile in the sense that to me, agile is not about the kind of the artifacts of, doing a stand up or doing that's all, like you can do agile without that. We can do stand up, we can do agile without sprints, right? You have Kanban and all these kind of things. It's not about that. Agile is essentially doing very, very quick iterations and injecting, customer and market feedback into those quick iterations. If you do these two, you're essentially being agile, and that's kind of the core of what agile is,
Yeah.
right? And to me, that's what you need to do at the early stages: is getting as many people as you can, to and again, kind of to the extent that you can, right? You don't want, 1,000 of them because you're not going to be able to consume that feedback.
Right.
But getting not just one, right? Getting multiple customers and getting those very quick iterations where you show something, you get feedback, you improve, and you basically have these design partners that get you to kind of the V1 of your product. And getting to these first customers, again, for us, it was just a lot of it is just, networking, right? It's going through your network. You
Mm.
have investors going through your investor network, reaching out to people, cold on LinkedIn or getting to friends that know somebody that could be a good fit. And it's just obviously, as the company scales, you build this go-to-market machine with, a marketing team, and lead generation, and it
Yep.
kinda
Yep.
at the early stages, like, you don't none of that is
Yeah.
needed. Just go
Right.
leverage the network of your friends, your investors, your advisors, other people on the team to get in front of people, get them excited about this and have them and I was surprised. I think people are gonna be surprised by how much people love being part of those innovations and helping startup companies
Yeah.
and, providing that feedback. People love doing that and, if they can be part of the kind of the success journey of the company, they're very happy to do that.
Well, I think a lot of people miss the fact that people wanna help, and when they help, they feel successful because 'cause they're a part of
Right.
this, right? And so, oftentimes, they'll call those early adopters, but I think a lot of people are willing to be early adopters in the things that they're interested in, wanna be part of, and if people are open and honest and ask for help I think what is there an old adage, "Ask for help and you receive money, ask for money and you, what it's something like that, what is it? Oh, you get advice. I think that's what it was. Like, ask for money, you get advice. Ask for advice, you get money. I think that's the phrase.
So that's
Um,
I haven't heard that one, but yeah, it's been
it's
pretty
pretty
consistent with
true.
my experience as well. Yeah.
But one of the things that you said I think super interesting is that quick iteration, and that's my mindset around all startup and growth. And why I say that, like you explained it very well in product, those quick iterations and learning and changing and adapting the product. That happens in every every single functional area of the business. Sales will figure out who do we talk to? how do we talk to them? And they're making these quick iterations of changing their scripts or their emails or however they reach out, which is connecting, maybe in marketing, reaching out. But then how do I order this conversation when I meet these people and so I call that like a ongoing dialing in of like sales or marketing or any functional area of the business. It probably even happened to you when you're going out to raise capital, right? Like you built the deck, you changed the deck, you got feedback, and it's those quick iterations. The companies, and I like to call it cadence. So, like with Peak, when we do it, it's the annual cadence and the quarterly cadence, and then the weekly meeting is a cadence. And all that is a feedback loop of communication to keep everybody communicating so we can quickly learn. And that's, I think, where the symbiosis starts to happen. And I think that happens from day one with a founder of the idea, the day they start. And as they start to, start to make a team and then they make teams of teams, as long as they can quickly iterate and change, I think those are the ones that tend to
Um,
win.
100%, like completely agree. It's across everything in the business. It's obviously across the product, but it's also across, how do you even talk about this, right? You start with, a way that, this is the right way to pitch this. And again, it's to investors or to customers or to, people that you want to bring as, you want to hire for the company. You need to convince them to kind of join your, vision of this. And and again, you have to iterate on how you talk about this, and you have to iterate on, how do you sell. And to some extent, I think it kind of goes into people talk about the kind of product market fit, process. I think
Yeah.
that product market fit process is not the kind of one point in time. It's this journey that starts when the company basically, is founded all the way up until when you get to, whatever, 50 million of ARR. And you know that if I'm going to hire the salesperson in Columbus, Ohio, and I do this type of training and this type of lead generation, they're going to produce, X amount in 6 months and, Y amount in 9 months and so forth. But that's the kind of the end of, maybe that product market fit, journey and the beginning of kind of, growth, or, let's stage growth even.
Right.
And a lot of it is sort of how do you perfect all of this? How do you, again, if one salesperson found something that works extremely well in a specific vertical, how do you make sure that everybody knows this very quickly and change things? And if something doesn't work, how do you quickly kind of learn that and pull it back? And then, everything, even, packaging and pricing, right? Like you try something and you want to kind of to get that market feedback and everything. Like almost every part of the business needs this very, very quick feedback loop.
Yep. And then they need a way to communicate that and learn from it and move forward together. Yeah. It
100%.
it can be really complex if you don't have a operating system or a methodology to do that. Especially as you grow and you have teams of teams, you need everybody using something to allow that to happen. It can be really complex. I find that most teams don't have that in the early stages and later stages, and eventually they start to pull it together at the later stages because they bring all these people in and they have experience doing it. But then they're trying to like mesh these systems and ways they do business together. You bring in your new sales guy, he wants to use it OKRs, you want to empower them, and then bring in a new head of engineering, they want to do it a different way. So it's nice when you can come in with like one operating system to do it or start early and grow into it.
Yeah,
One of the other things I want to talk to you about, you have remote teams, is that right?
I do. Yeah.
And how has that been? And has that been something that you planned all along, or kind of it came over time? Or
Essentially, we started the, being in the office, then, sort of COVID, pretty early on in our journey, COVID happened. So we had to be fully remote. And then as we were kind of transitioning back, we basically, again, we had the office, right? So it was an option to come back, but then we didn't, again, a lot of people were in the bit, one is we started hiring outside kind of the Bay Area and also outside of, even kind of the outskirts of the Bay Area where, it would be hard for people to kind of come into the office every day. But then generally the Bay Area took a very long time coming back to the office. So we kind of had the office as optional, but that we didn't force anybody to come in. And it's hard as a startup, right? If the big companies are not forcing people to come in, it's very hard for you as a startup to do that. Um, because again, if nobody's in the office, you don't want to be the only one forcing people to
right.
come in. Um, but this for us worked extremely, extremely well. I
Mm,
think part of it is just again, a lot of it was, salespeople are always in the field anyhow. It's not about that. It was mostly kind of engineering and product.
right.
I just had a phenomenal engineering leader that has managed remote teams in the past and was able to just put in the right systems and the right processes in place to make sure that it goes. And again, I wouldn't say it's 100% figured out because there's some things that you miss if you're not in the office, but you
Yeah.
can create, situations where people do come together, on some cadence to kind of see one another. And again, it's always this, but again, it's hard to know how much you're missing by not having, let's say 2 days in the office. Um, so it's again, I can't say we really completely figured it out, but it's been working
Right.
pretty well for us so far.
Again, another iteration, right? Like another like dialing in, figuring out. When did that
Exactly.
happen? Was that at your Series A? Did you already raise your Series A when COVID hit, or was that
We're just coming out of our Series A.
okay? So it's just coming out. So talking about stages, what was for you guys like? What was the most important thing that brought the growth from A to B?
So there's some kind of high level market things that happen. So again, for us, kind of with what we do, we're using confidential computing. Confidential computing is based on this, hardware, components that the CPU vendors are putting, right? It's Intel, AMD, and ARM, and NVIDIA
Yeah.
into the chipsets, and then the cloud vendors have all adopted this and made confidential computing part of their platforms. And to some extent, that's where we fit in. Kind of like how, like every time you have a new, um, new hardware architecture, you need a software stack on top of it to enable it. It's kind of like what VMware did to virtualization,
Right.
right? When virtualization was part of the chip, but then or part of the silicon, but VMware just made build a software stack to make it easy.
Right.
That's what we do for confidential computing
Would you
across the platform.
define that as deep tech?
Oh, yes, it's very.
Okay. And what's your
Um,
definition of deep tech?
okay, the way maybe it's like an investor point of view, but basically when
Right.
investors kind of look at things, they say, okay, what are the risk points for something like this? Is the risk going to be around, market adoption? Is it going to be around execution with this team? Is it going to be around, the technology? So anything that has technology risk to it, to me, tends to be, and kind of the more technology risk, the more deep tech it is. Right? Self-driving car is a good example of, a huge tech, or quantum computers,
Right.
huge amount of technology risk, very low market risk. If you build a quantum computer, like the market is gonna buy it, with self-driving cars. So to me, that was kind of the how I looked at this. It's a very, very complicated thing to build. If you
Yes.
build it, the value is just so large. So that's kind of how I view deep tech. So basically what sort of happened between the Series A and the Series B, I think kind of the bet the investors took on us was, is confidential computing going to become the default? Is it going to be becoming the dominant technology? And, obviously, and then, can we go build this? What sort of happened was, we started kind of building the first prototype. We're able to raise the Series A. And then between the Series A and the Series B, the things that happened is, again, first customer traction, which obviously was very important to kind of start, proving the market, but also the fact that all the clouds have adopted this. That's happened between our Series A and our Series B. And it sort of it was very clear that the, silicon vendors and the clouds are saying, okay, this is the technology to go do this, which obviously made it great for us. So just a ton of tailwinds. And then we were able to kind of build a product, take it to market, have, initial customers. And to some extent, the kind of talk about, deep tech, which kind of gets me to the deeper the tech is to some extent, the less market traction you need to go raise significant rounds. And what I mean by that, if you're a, marketing influencer type of it's gonna be hard for you to even raise $1 million seed before you have a lot of marketing, a seed before you have like $1 million of, ARR, right? But if you're building a self-driving car, we've seen companies raising, hundreds of millions or, billions without a product in market yet because it's so hard to go build. Right. So the deeper the tech is, the less and, the clearer it is that, there's gonna be a lot of market traction if you can build this. It's just the way the fundraising works is different. So
Yeah.
for us, because we're relatively deep, again, security in general tends to be deep tech, but what we're
Mhm.
building is kind of deeper tech within security. It was always about, kind of, building, and we needed less market traction to some extent to be able to get to the next round. But now obviously the growth stage, it's all about, market traction.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. What advice would you give the deep tech founders for working in like complex fields like that when it comes to like either market entry or fundraising or building a team?
Good question. On the fundraising side, to some extent, it's always, I guess, in every aspect. On the fundraising side, I was going to say, go work with the right investors because it's easy. It's a long, it's usually a long, journey. Go find the right investors that are going to understand this and kind of be there to support you throughout this journey, and also have the right, network and the right connections to help you get to the people that you need to get to. But it's sort of true in terms of hiring, right? It's the right, people that can, go to this, but also have the kind of understanding of the vision and kind of the patient, the excitement, the kind of the shared vision to go again. If you're hiring somebody that says, "Oh, I want to come here for a year and kind of do a nice, whatever, and get out,"
Right.
they're not going to be the right people to kind of to bring into a deep tech company. So it's just working. I think a lot of kind of It's generally life, but definitely when you're building a company, it's kind of who are the right people that you want to
Mhm.
work with, that you had to have in the company, around the company, supporting the company, investing in the company. I think that's one of the most important things that you can, most important decision that you can make.
Kinda goes back to that alignment, just really aligning with someone that's gonna be long term, not short term, is that sounds like is the right way to do it.
100%.
It's
100%.
hard, I think, especially when you're new to raising capital, to understand what is the environment, who are those players, right? And it's usually not on their website, right? Their website doesn't say, "We're actively investing, we have an open fund, this is what we're looking for." Like, it's hard to get that data and information on who to connect with and reach out to.
It is and it's not in the sense, again, go talk to other founders, go talk to other people in the
Yeah,
space, go talk to even other investors. They're going to tell you, oh, these are the investors doing deep tech, or these are the investors focusing on security, or these are the investors focusing
right,
on, whatever it is you want to build, right? The next, dating website, right? There's some investors that are going to do this and some investors are not. And if you talk to people, they're going to tell you who are the right people. And then, once you do have, term sheets or even before sometimes, as you're talking to people, go founders tend to be pretty open about these things, and there's sort of a reputation that investors, I'm guessing, everybody kind of builds over time. So go talk to people and see, are these the right investors for me? Are these the right people that
yeah.
are going to fit into kind of the culture that I'm trying to build that's going to make sense for the company? Same if you do with with employees, right? Nobody's going to go hire somebody without doing reference checks. I argue don't take money from somebody without doing reference checks as well. It's an even more. I heard this super interesting statistic is that the average, length of a relationship between founders, and investors is longer than the average marriage in the US,
I believe it.
which makes sense, but it's a very long-term relationship. I would argue it's even harder to get out of than, marriage. So make the right choice, and do the background references to make sure that, these are the right people that you want to work with long term.
Right, and you say, connect with people to connect with the right people. I'm sure that's a lot, and I know this because my network with, tech stars and YC, but I'm sure that was really helpful being in YC to have those other founders and that platform. I think is so important to be part of organizations like that to build that network, especially if you're a first time founder. Like it's hard to have a quantitative look at that, but that network that you get from there is so powerful.
Oh, 100%. And again, there's a bunch like any, if you already worked in tech before, then you know people. And again, I went to Haas and I leveraged that network. My co-founder went to Stanford, did his PhD at Stanford, so he was able to leverage that network. There's just a bunch of, again, there's the 8200 network that is extremely extremely powerful as well. There's just, and again, this is sort of my personal experience, but anybody in the space, if you're just coming now out of college for the first time, like I'm sure you have friends, you have you know people that you might know, the college you went to, or, just go and just reach out cold to people. People are a lot more open to helping out than people realize, especially if you're a startup founder, starting something new and it sounds exciting and you have a lot of passion for it. Like people are going to be willing to help. So kind of start doing that. And these people can connect you to other people and you kind of grow your network. If you don't have the ability to go do that, it's going to be very hard for you to be a founder in the first place because a lot of the work of the of founders is going out, talking to people, getting connected to other people that can help and can kind of this is again, it's sales
Yeah,
to something. This is what sales is, but
right.
it's even more so for for founders.
You have to get comfortable, one, being uncomfortable, but you also have to get comfortable asking for help. And I think a lot of people will
Yes.
say, make it until you fake it. I just don't believe the best founders do that. I think the best founders are open and looking for help and putting
Yes.
themselves out there in that vulnerable way. That's how they get people to surround them.
100%. Please, again, take the risk. Please, and don't be afraid. Like one of the things you have to learn very early on is to, you're going to hear a lot of no's. Like a lot of people are going to reach out. They're going to say no. It's going to be, people that you try to hire. Could be customers. Could be investors. With investors, like you're going to hear a lot of no's, and it's fine. Just get comfortable with it. It's kind of like, finding somebody to date and marry, right? Like you only need one, right? To say yes. It's true with investors. You just need, one. Ideally, you have more and you can choose, but just say you need one. And even if you hear these stories of people that talk to 100 investors, they've heard, 99 no's and one yes, and the company's up and running, And some of the most successful companies had these stories of, like, Airbnb, again, another, YC company, they came to talk to us. The amount of no's, and understand what, like, it sounds like such a crazy idea. Oh, I'm going to have a stranger come and stay in my house, or I'm going to go stay in some stranger's house. They're like, it sounds like such a crazy idea that will never work. They've heard so many no's, but they built one of the most amazing companies on the planet, right? So just don't give up. Don't be, don't let that get you down. Just, shake yourself up and keep going.
Awesome. Well, I have one last question for you, but before I ask that question, I like to open it up. I hit you with a lot of questions today, so I'm going to allow you to ask me something.
I guess just in terms of, you talked about, teams and kind of what makes teams successful. What kind of got you to kind of focus on this and to kind of go so deep on this one specific topic?
It's crazy. It definitely feels like I was pulled to do this versus like choosing to do this. And it's probably like a lot of founders, like, it's really hard to articulate why you really went deep into one area really specifically, but I do feel like it's a calling for me. And I think it stems a little bit from I've always been interested in business since I can ever remember. I also went to school for entrepreneurship. Like I was always very, very interested in entrepreneurship. And when I graduated, it was the dot-com boom. I had sold my first business in college and it was .com and VC fast moving companies, and the speed at which I could learn from those companies versus the other jobs and businesses I had started before that, was just at a speed of learning that I just loved, and so I just dug into it. And my first thesis and idea was around how do you get the right people in an organization to succeed? And then once I did that for a while with the first kind of iteration of Collective Genius, I realized very quickly it's not about just having the right people, but getting them to work together in the right way to be successful. And that was a lot more difficult task to really uncover and figure out, especially at the early stage, the growth stage, and the late growth stage, is to figure out like what types of what I would refer to as an operating system works for those types of companies to be successful. And for 25 years later, I feel like I really kind of nailed that. But I think it really came back to just wanting to see more companies that are doing things that have never been done before, innovate and change, and have more of them be successful. And I just felt like too many of them were failing. And sometimes in the early days, I found it was obvious why they're failing, but later, working with hundreds and hundreds of these companies, now I kind of feel like I've seen the same thing over and over again and found some of the really easy things that they can do to be successful. And for whatever reason, they still, a lot of these companies just don't know what those things are. I don't know if I answered that right.
No, you understand that, and yeah,
So,
it's great.
okay, so here's the last question for you. It's more of a scenario, and it's going to probably be the hardest question you ever asked or answered in your life. And so the scenario is this: you're trapped on a desert island for the rest of your life. Fortunately for you, you have water and food, you even have healthcare, you have everything taken care of. You have shelter, and it's a tropical, beautiful desert island. So if you like that weather, that's great. The one thing you don't have is entertainment. You have no entertainment. But luckily, an old boombox from the 80s drifted ashore with endless batteries. But you only get to choose one cassette tape to listen to the rest of your life. Now, even though I said 80s, it can be of any genre, so it could be new music or old music, but you can only choose one album to listen to the rest of your life. What is the album you're gonna listen to?
Oh wow, that's a great. It's funny because originally I was gonna say Dire Straits, which I love, but then kind of thinking this, if this is the for the rest of my life, I would want to do something that kind of reminds me of home. I would
Oh, that's
probably
good.
think of like, maybe like early, I don't know, I was when I was a teenager, like even like childhood songs from, from Israel, from where I grew up. That's just gonna remind me of, home, and if I had to listen to this the one thing over and over again for the rest of my life. It's called, like, the translation is called the 16th Lamb, which is like this collection of essentially, it's like essentially like a children's, thing, but like adults love it as well because it's such a, and it's just, again, it's just gonna, the feeling that it's more about the feeling than the actual like the music, but the feeling it's gonna have. So that would
That's a
be
great
one that
answer.
I would.
That's a great answer. I haven't had anybody say something that was like nostalgic to bring them back to that. That's great. I love that. And what's the name of it again?
It's well, the translation is the 16th lamb.
Okay, that's
It's
awesome.
like it talks about the kind of when you count, when you count, lambs or, sheep as you kind of fall asleep. There's like this one song and it said like the 16th one is the one where you fall asleep in. Okay,
Okay,
that's why that's the name of the album. It's just a bunch of these very cute,
yeah,
children's, and that would be the one I would take.
awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes Unplugged. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.